Ginger, you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, great. I was waiting for the notice that the recording had started on my end. Here we go. Perfect. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to the January Lunch and Learn. We know how busy you are and how cold it is, so we're so grateful for your time. On this webinar, we have WIC staff across the state of Maine. Also invited were child Head Start staff and public health nursing. So I'm not sure if any of those folks joined, but if you do need CEUs, contact Sam Blanchard, as she said, either through Teams or through email. So now I'm very excited to introduce you to Dr. Maureen Black. She's a professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Maryland School of Medicine and a distinguished fellow at RTI International. Maureen is a pediatric psychologist who trained at Emory University. She researches programs and policies to promote child development and prevent health disparities associated with poverty, food insecurity, under and overweight, and lack of responsive caregiving and learning opportunities in Maryland and in low and middle income countries throughout the world. So she's right who we want to be listening to. So very excited. She directs an interdisciplinary growth and nutrition clinic for young children with growth and or feeding problems. Maureen has served as the president of the Maryland WIC Advisory Board and on multiple committees for NIH, UNICEF, WHO, and other organizations interested in young children's growth and development. And certainly we are as well. So welcome. We're so excited to have you, and take it away.
Thank you. Let me share my screen, and we can be off and running. Okay, thank you. I'm absolutely delighted to be invited and to talk to folks who are involved with WIC. I have to tell you, I've worked with the WIC program in Maryland for many years. And I think what WIC does is absolutely fabulous for children. So as one states one's biases, I have a very strong bias in favor of WIC. So we're going to be talking about nutrition and child development today. Let's go. Okay. Here we are. And turn. Okay, so the objectives are, we'll look at how nutrition and child development are related among young children. We will talk about how WIC can incorporate principles of child development into nutrition counseling, and also about how to address parents' concerns about children's development and nutrition. So early child development really begins at conception. It begins before conception. And the period of time from conception until age 2 is referred to as the first 1,000 days. So that means 9 months of pregnancy and then 24 months from birth to age 2. If you add those together, that's 33 months. And if you multiply by 30, that is 1,000. So we'll look at what happens during that really critical time, those first 1,000 days, and that's where you do much of your work. The second 1,000 days, from ages 2 to 5, well, that's referred to as the second 1,000 days. So during that time, children have a tremendous amount of growth. And this is focusing on the first 1,000 days, the box that I've drawn. And then the second 1,000 days, when we look also up to age 5, you can see in addition to growth, there is phenomenal development that happens during that time. So the two really go together extremely well. What happens is, this is a picture of your brain and of everyone's brain. I've drawn a box around the first 1,000 days. You can see that goes from -9 from conception up through the up to birth, and then by month up to 12 months, and then it goes up by age, so up to age 2. So that's the first 1,000 days. If you look at what's happening during that time, you can see that cell migration begins prior to birth, that myelination happens prior to birth and then extends up beyond the first 1,000 days. You can see that the visual and auditory cortex come online shortly after birth. So there's a tremendous amount that happens in children's brains. Now, one of the things that I do when I give this talk is I ask people to find their own age. So if you go up on the x-axis by years and you find where you are, and if you look at that, then you can see what is happening in our brains right now. And the answer is not much. So that if you're interested in investing in early brain development, when would you invest? Well, clearly you would start investing during the first 1,000 days, because when these things are coming online, there's a lot of plasticity, so that children are very open at this point to new experiences and new opportunities. So it's clearly a critical time in terms of both nutrition and early child development. Now, how do we know what children need, what children's brains need? Well, we have something called nurturing care. And what this means is that what children need in order to grow and develop is that they need 5 things. They need good health, they need adequate nutrition, they need responsive caregiving, that's people who love and take care of them. They need security and safety, people who protect them, and they need opportunities for early learning. Okay, where do they get these things? Well, they get them from what's called enabling environments. So the very first environment is their caregivers, is their home, is their family. And that's where they get most of these things. Beyond that, there are communities that help children get these 5 things they need, and supportive services, and then enabling policies. So children need all 5. If they have 1, that's great, but they work together, so they need all 5. It means if any one of them is not working well, then the system is in disarray. So they need all 5 in order to grow and develop well. And this is how it works. So there's a genetic blueprint that we all have. Well, that only goes so far, because there's really an interaction between the genes and the environment that starts prior to conception. So that depends on parents' health and well-being before pregnancy, and then it continues during pregnancy, that interaction between the environment. That means what the mother eats, whether the mother smokes cigarettes or drinks alcohol or is stressed. All of that interacts with the genes to create the child. And then, of course, after the child is born, it's the environment in infancy and childhood. So what happens, it's like Vegas. What happens early in life just stays there. It doesn't go away. And it influences then health, learning, and behavior throughout life. So the quality of kids' early environment really can shape their future potential. So there are lots of opportunities here. There are 3 basic principles that we're going to talk about in child development. That's learning and temperament, and what's called autonomy and self-regulation. So I'll show you how they work. If we think about learning, children learn through something called through their senses. So there's a sensory-motor period. So they're very strong observers. The picture on the left where it says observe and imitate is a classic video that was made in the 70s. And so what you see, this is the first few days of life, and you see the child, the infant, imitating the examiner. What the video shows is that the examiner sticks out his tongue and the infant sticks out her tongue. So that observation and imitation happens very, very early and continues. That is how children learn. So it's important for us who are helping moms and children and dads and children to remember that this is how children actually learn. And then the next one is exploration. Children have an interest in what is around them. And it's not just looking at it, they want to touch it, they want to feel it. And what we see under play is that they imitate what they've seen. So they see something and then they want to try it, want to react it. So you see the child trying to feed the doll, or you see the child climbing on something to get the ball. So they're very hungry for these interactions. Now, if we look at temperament, its temperament is classifies how the baby reacts to new things. And we see 3 examples: a fussy baby, an easy baby, and a timid baby. So this is how temperament is important. If, for example, you have a baby and your friend invites you to dinner and your friend says, bring the baby. If you have the center baby, if you have an easy baby, you're likely to take the baby and it'll be fine. She'll smile, she'll laugh, and she'll be pleasant, and she'll get lots of interactions from others, and everything is great. If your baby is the one on the right, is the timid baby, you may still take the baby and you're likely to hold her, and she'll be much more sort of guarded, and people may be a bit more guarded to her because she's a bit timid and not as interactive as the easy baby. Now, if you have the baby on the left, what's likely to happen? Get a sitter. What's likely is that you're not going to take the baby who's fussy because you suspect the baby will be fussy there. So then what that means is that this fussy baby gets far fewer interactions than the easy baby does. That's based on the baby's temperament. What to do about that? Well, we have something called goodness of fit, and that is to try and sort out what environment will be best for your baby. So how to help the fussy baby? Perhaps you find times when the baby is less fussy, things that the baby likes, so that you're sure that the baby is not stuck at home with the sitter all the time while other things are going on. So we look for opportunities that will take advantage of the baby's temperament and help them adjust to situations that may be challenging. What does autonomy mean? Well, one of the first words that children can say is mine. They're egocentric. I can do it myself. I do it myself. So that would be portrayed as, this is mine, back up, and I will feed myself. It doesn't matter if I make a mess, I can do it, and I want to do it. And poor inhibitory control means if you tell me I can't do something, I will cry and scream. I will let you know that I'm not happy, but I haven't yet learned to control.
Dr. Black, I think that you muted yourself. So if you go, there you go. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry. I was moving my hands. You cannot see me, but I talk with my hands. And
you're muted again. There we go.
All right. All right. Sorry. I will try and control my hands. Okay. Onward. I hope you got that this is self-regulation develops during early childhood, and we help kids develop this, but we recognize ways that they can be in control, and we'll talk about that. So what are some responsive parenting principles? What can you do to help children? One of the most important things is having routines. Routines help children feel secure. That means routines around Eating, routines around where the child sits, where the parent sits, and routines around bedtime. All of those routines just help children feel much more secure. They know what's happening and what's coming. They're very much managing the setting, that if you have junk food or food sitting around you don't want your child to have, of course they will want it. So keep it out of sight so they don't see. Modeling. We saw one of the earlier slides is that children want to do what they see. They want to do what they see you do, what they see another child does. So if you want your child to eat something, eat it. You eat it. And control. Your child wants to be in control. So you find ways that the child can have control that is acceptable to you. So rather than saying, what do you want? The child may say, I want cookies. And you may not want to give them cookies. So you give them a choice. Would you like the orange one or the red one? Would you like the broccoli or the carrots? And that you celebrate efforts and successes with hugs and high fives, not with cookies. Remember that parents are bigger and smarter than their kid, but every single day the child is gaining on them. So you take advantage of knowing how children learn and how children are developing, and you use those in positive ways to help kids. This is just an example of children like to feed parents. So you play with these things that you want children to do. The hugs and high fives go very far. A little bit about breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is recommended universally, absolutely. Why is that? Well, the human milk provides nutrients and immunity, of course, and the skin-to-skin contact releases oxytocin and helps with the motion regulation in the moms. And that the mother-infant relationship builds responsivity, builds attachment, and the infant does learn to self-regulate in terms of stopping when they have had enough and indicating when they are hungry. And the cost, much less expensive to be breastfeeding, and the convenience. So there are many, many pluses of breastfeeding. These are some data. The CDC has a breastfeeding report card. So if we look at that, it tells us 84% of women initiate breastfeeding. And then exclusive breastfeeding, at 3 months, they report 46%, at 6 months, 25%. So it goes down over time. And at 12 months, there are about a third of women who are giving breast milk of any kind. But if we look at the figure on the right, that 85% is the number of women who express or who pump breast milk and feed breast milk in a bottle. Well, let me tell you, I endorse breastfeeding, and it has enabled by pumping and enabling babies to receive breast milk through bottles. It has been wonderful, but there are some costs, and these are some of the costs just to consider. There's not skin-to-skin contact, so the oxytocin part is off. It can have mother infant or other infant, which is a positive thing, meaning that others can be feeding the infant. But the infant has less regulation with a bottle because bottle feeding tends to top off. And then there's an issue of the stored milk. So what it tells us is what we've learned. I've recently been involved in a breastfeeding project, is that we have more breastfeeding because we have pumping, but there are some of the other issues to consider as well. These are some developmental milestones related to eating. So the first 6 months, there's a normal suck swallow. Infants feed on demand. It's breast milk or formula, and they can indicate when they have reached satiety by turning away. So their signals can be clear. During the second up to 6 months, at that point, they can sit, they have good head control, emerging hand control, so they can start to pick things up, not at all well yet. They'll lean forward toward food with their mouth open, giving signals, turning their head when full, starting to eat with their fingers and sit in a high chair. So you can see the child development pieces enable them to do many more things in terms of increasing their nutrient repertoire. During from 6 to 12 months, then they can reach for a spoon to self-feed. They can use, that's a good time for a 2-spoon method, where both the parent and the child have a spoon, and they can have finger foods. This is the baby-led weaning time as well. And then 12 to 24 months, they can self-feed, transition from purees to more complex textures and flavors, socialize, and that's often when they become picky, when the picky eating piece starts. If we think about parent and feeding behaviors, they're sometimes organized along structure and nurturance into these 4 boxes. So let's look at the way these boxes might work. So when structure is high and nurturance is high, that's called responsive feeding. So it means that the caregiver is in charge of what food is offered, when it's offered, and how it's offered. And the child is in charge of deciding how much to eat or if to eat. So a caregiver might say, looks like you like the peas, meaning that the child has the mouth open and the feeding and the parent is at this time feeding. This also could be that the child is feeding, but there's a structure and it's very nurturant. So that's called responsive feeding. If we look at some of the other blocks, if we look, for example, when the structure is high, but the nurturance is low, so that's right under the box I've drawn, that's a very controlling situation. And you can see the child's head is very clearly turned away from the spoon. So the child is saying, I've had it, no. And the parent is saying, basically, shut up and eat the piece. So that's a very controlling situation. It's, as we see, it's not an optimal situation, and it goes against the child wanting some control somewhere. If we look up at the box I drew and then off to the right, where the structure is low and the nurturance is high, that is an indulgent parent. And that is, I'll give you whatever you want. Take this ice cream. Just please stop crying. What is it that you would like? I run a clinic for children who do not grow well or have feeding problems. And we have amazing examples of parents giving their children whatever they want, even if it is cookies for meals, just to make sure that the child is not crying. That's clearly not in kids' best interest, either from a nutrition perspective or from basically being in control of their parents. And then the one down at the bottom right, uninvolved, is don't bother me. The structure's low, the nurturance is low. A meal? Not bothered. So this is one way of thinking about parenting and feeding behavior. So the parent responsivity applied to feeding means a parent who's sensitive to the child's cues, responsive to the child's cues in a way that is prompt, meaning I'm responsive now, appropriate, meaning that it's appropriate for the child's development and age, appropriate for the culture, appropriate for the situation, but it does not mean giving the child what they want. It means responding, but not necessarily giving the child what they want, moving to something that is appropriate. So parent, this is what we just said, it's not giving children what they want or letting children be in charge of what they want whenever they want it. That's not being responsive. So what are the consequences of controlling or force feeding? Underweight children remain underweight. It actually reduces children's desire for food that's being forced, and it increases the likelihood of subsequent food refusal. So if you're saying, eat, let's go, let's eat, it's a high tension for everyone and unlikely to help the child eat. So this is what responsive feeding looks like. The mother or father or whoever offers a bite of food. The child opens the mouth and takes it. They offer a second bite. Then at this time, the child looks away with the mouth shut. Ah, this is the operative time. So if the caregiver waits, smiles, and offers finger food, the child is likely to pick up the food and eat. And so that's a positive story. If, on the other hand, if we go back and this time the caregiver holds the child's mouth and force feeds, what's likely to happen is the child cries and spits out the food. So this is the operative period, what the mother does, because there will be a time when the child looks away and gives a signal. So that's the key to going from unresponsive to being more responsive. So if feeding is interactive, how do children contribute to the interaction? Well, they contribute through their appetite, their body size, their intake, their temperament, and the mother forms their perceptions and their beliefs about what will happen. So remember, if you have a child who is easy and someone invites you to dinner, you'll take them. If you have a child who's fussy, you might not. So mothers are forming their beliefs and perceptions all the time about what their children are doing, whether they have a good appetite or not so good appetite. These things are forming mothers' perceptions. So why would parents use forcing and pressuring? Well, they might be concerned about the child's size, about the child's eating behavior, about the child's temperament, about the child's health, about the child's competence, or about food availability or waste or having to get out of the house on time. So there are many reasons that parents might use force and pressuring. So what are some strategies that are guaranteed to create feeding problems? How could we create feeding problems with our children? Well, we could try to force or trick or bribe or negotiate with them. That's a good strategy to encourage the child to refuse or insist on favorite foods. All of that bargaining and forcing and tricking. Kids are smart and they get smarter every day. Remember, they're gaining. So those tricks don't work. They are more likely to create feeding problems. How about rewarding with food? If you eat this veggie, you'll get cake. Well, what we know is that the child will learn to value the cake. You're giving it as a reward, not the veggie. So giving food as a reward often boomerangs. What about restricting food? Oh, we can't have that. Well, what will happen is we know children will overvalue what you have restricted. That will gain in value. So if we say that you're worried about a child being heavy and therefore there's a food we don't give, they will value that food even more, and then they're likely to do what we call eat in the absence of hunger. So meaning if that food is available, even if they're not hungry, it has extra super value and they're more likely to eat it. What about using food to manage behavior? What happens is then that teaches the child to emotionalize food and to eat in response to emotions, so that when I'm stressed, if my best friend's name are Ben and Jerry, then I'll go to that. And that's not an adaptive way to manage being emotionally stressed. So using food to manage behavior is not really helping the child develop a healthy attitude toward food. How about letting the child decide what and when to eat? Well, kids from early on will choose high sugar, high salt options. If you let them choose when and what, they will have those options. They'll have them throughout the day. And when a meal comes, they won't be hungry and they won't be interested. So that's a guarantee. And the other one is filling up on nutrition supplements. We see many kids in our clinic who have been prescribed Pediasure or other supplements. And if they have those first, then they don't have the sense of hunger and then satiety that comes from a meal. So that doesn't help either. The goal is to help children learn to respond to their hunger along with the structure that families have set up around meal times, and that when the meal is over, the meal is over. These are some strategies to manage toddlers' behavior. As we said before, is manage the environment so that remove food or dangerous or fragile items so they're just not there. That you set up that child-friendly spaces, meaning meals with the TV off. Again, it goes back to parents are smarter than their kids and in charge of the rules. You don't let your child play in the street. Well, you can turn the TV off if you wish. I can't emphasize enough routines. Routines, and in our busy lifestyle, it's often hard to have routines, but routines help toddlers feel secure and around the important things in a toddler's life, which are meals and bedtime. So having those routines will help a toddler feel more secure. If they feel secure, they're often less reactive to changes. The other part in terms of what are toddler appropriate expectations, to be very clear and consistent. Toddlers have very good memories, so that if you're changing and if you are giving something that is very valued, a sweet, a toy, then they will expect having that again. They also want to feel independent. They remember the autonomy. They want to feel independent and important. So find jobs that they can do. Maybe it's putting the napkin on the table. Maybe it's taking a napkin off the table. Maybe it's drawing something on the napkin. Some kind of job makes them invested in the meal and makes them feel important, and they want to feel important. Modeling what you want. We say to families, if you want your child to eat something, you eat it and look like you like it. And then praising either the desired behavior or the approximation for the desired behavior, what looks like a child is trying or a child is doing. So that deserves a praise. And what the praise is can be a high five, a thumbs up, a hug, a nice job, whatever, not an extra piece of food. So what are some other strategies to manage toddler behavior? Is appropriate play materials. Toddlers want to practice new skills. They want to explore. If you've been around toddlers, you know that they're very attracted to something that you have, and that is your phone. And the developers of apps and phones are well aware of that. So the availability of media for toddlers is quite high. I'm not wild about toddlers playing on phones, but I can tell you that we have toddlers in our clinic who are probably more adept at their phone than I am. So the toddlers benefit from exploring on things other than phones through colorful materials or through rotating materials, so that there are, particularly at this time of the year, the things that have come for the holidays don't all have to be out at the time, but can be rotated. So what is responsive parenting that can help? It's again recognizing signals not only around meals, but around other kinds of things as well, and responding promptly. It lets the children know that their parents are listening to them, even if they're redirecting them to a more appropriate activity. And what we know is that when parents don't respond, when they ignore them, well, what is a toddler going to do? Boom, boom, boom. they're going to escalate their behavior. So that can be called a temper tantrum. This is, so you think, what are the difficult times in a young child's day? Well, often a difficult time is getting out the door in the morning. So you look for routines that you can do, that you do every day, including the having breakfast, and whatever routine you can do that the toddler has a role, so that they are picking up their backpack or putting their lunchbox from one place to another, or whatever. It gives the child a role and something you can cue them to do, and something you can say, hey, good job, so that you're approaching the morning with a smile on your face rather than a, let's get out of here quickly. How to create a healthy home environment. These are things I know you know. It's planning family meals and stocking your cabinet and fridge with healthy snacks, the fruits and veggies. Cut them into pieces that are bite-size, and there's no waiting, and eat together at a table without the TV. And the fruits and veggies can be done in interesting ways. Toddlers like some novelty. They like consistency. They like some novelty as well. So little creativity here. And don't stock this stuff. The the big box stores where you can buy these at a reduced cost. Well, what the reduced cost is in terms of money is a high cost in terms of wearing it on your thighs or stomach or whatever. Children who gain excess weight early in life, the bad news is they keep it. So we don't want our kids to gain excess weight, and they're not the ones going to the store. So don't stock these high-fat foods or high-fat drinks. Create a healthy home environment. So again, this is part of a routine that after dinner, you take a walk, you go to the park. When thirsty, water is the first choice or is available. And for heaven's sakes, don't put TV and video games in the bedroom. If the TV is in the bedroom, you know what can happen? It could break, meaning, oh, we have to get it fixed. And fixing basically means moving it out of there, putting it someplace else. It's really not in kids' best interest. And be a role model, so that if you want your child to eat fruits and veggies, the parents eat them, and eat healthy portions on small plates, eat breakfast every day with them. A physical activity is to build it into your routine, so that every day we do something physical with a child, and that no one in the household is watching TV all day, all the time. Its parents often know what they want for their children, but they do not necessarily translate that into their own behavior. So the key is helping families realize that your child is watching you. We make videos of in our clinic, we make videos of our children and parent having a meal. And we use that both diagnostically and therapeutically. The therapeutic thing that we do is we show it back to the family. And in a video, 100% of the time, you can find the child looking at the parent, in which case we say, oh, look at her looking at you. She's not taking her eyes off you. And it communicates to the parent that what they do, the child sees and internalizes. Whether the parent is off playing on their phone or the parent is eating herself. So it indicates, or it shows to parents that their children are in fact watching them, and they will do what they see the parent do. So that's a key way to be a role model. This is limiting fast foods. It means should one ever go to fast food? Yes, because if you don't go, then it becomes a forbidden fruit. So you help them go to a fast food and have an alternative to the sweetened drink, or have something that's fun and reasonably healthy, so that it's not a forbidden fruit that you would never ever do it. and then build these healthy diet and physical activity patterns. So focus on healthy things, opportunities for healthy diet and physical activity, avoiding restrictions or fear or punishment, because that boomerangs and the child doesn't like that level of control, and then it seems bizarre, but they will do something that tests you, that pushes your buttons, and that puts the child in control. And unfortunately, many of us will respond to the child being in control. So it establish healthy patterns in the first place. And that brings us to the end. I thank you. We have some opportunity for discussion, which is pretty exciting. And I look forward to your comments and questions and so on.
Thank you, Dr. Black. That's great. If you all would like to unmute yourselves or turn your cameras on, if you have any questions or you want to discuss anything, this is the time to do it, or pop it in the chat if you're more comfortable putting your questions or comments, thoughts in the chat.
If people do not have questions, I can come up with questions.
I actually have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
This is Anna Bullitt, and I work in Portland, well, in Cumberland County. This is a question actually because I reviewed your slides already and I shared them with a colleague. And so we had a conversation because her program does in-home visitation and is there a lot of times at mealtime. And everything you talked about today is definitely what they, encourage and try to teach. They use a model called Parents as Teachers for their home visitation program. And one of the struggles they have is that, especially with families who are newer to the country, they really are and have experienced lots of trauma and food insecurity. There's lots of force feeding that's happening at mealtime, like straight up just like shoving the food in the baby's mouth, not even. And when counseled on it, it's kind of like the parents almost just laugh at the staff, so there's like definitely a cultural thing there. So we would love if you have any like advice or experience to talk around what the best approach when a family thinks what you're saying is bananas, but you clearly see this like disordered practice of this force feeding happening in front of you. And thanks so much. I loved all this material. You were awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I certainly have seen that also. I lived in Bangladesh for several years and in Peru for a year, much more in Bangladesh. People are very, very worried about their child being basically being undernourished and then dying. So, which is real. They have a reason to be concerned. So sometimes acknowledging that that what our concerns are here is that, and particularly those families who were receiving home visiting, that your child, we're going to make sure that your child is very, very healthy, and that the goal is not only what your child is eating today, but that your child develops really healthy eating patterns, eating habits. What I have seen in Bangladesh, and in India, what they did is called dream feeding. So what dream feeding is you wait until the child is like in a semi awake state, like nodding off, and then you shovel in the food. I mean, it's a dangerous, it's a terrible practice. So I think it's somewhat trying to understand why they're doing that. That's why I had this slide that people are often doing that because of a concern. So what concerns do you have, or how did you decide to do that? I remember a mother, I was making a demonstration video, and I asked just a clinic mom if we could video her 9-month-old child, and yes, so she brought some food for the child to eat. So she brought Cheetos. So I said to her, how did you decide to bring the Cheetos? And she said, well, cheese is good for babies, so I thought about the Cheetos. Well, there ain't no cheese in Cheetos. So I could say, Yes, cheese is good for babies. And this is a really good opportunity for your baby to have this kind of cheese or that. So it's finding a way. If you hit it straight on, this is not the way to do it, they'll resist. So if you ask, how did you decide? Why are you doing this? And you try to then use that to move to another option, right? Or help them realize showing families what a growth chart looks like, explaining it very clearly, can sometimes help. Just looking at it without explaining it, they won't get it. So, yeah, you have to say that this is basically, if we took 100 babies born the same day as your child, then 20 would be smaller, 80 would be larger. That's perfect. Your kid is great. Like that. People have other, other questions. There are lots of, certainly lots of issues, and it is hard for, we make it hard also, not only for new parents, new to this country, but it's hard to know what's healthy. And do your parents know how to look for the WIC insignia in the grocery store? So we use that a lot as to what are healthy choices. So tell me what else are, what other challenges families present? I'm sure they do. Do you see particularly for 2-year-olds, they probably less so for younger kids, but the pickiness. Do you have families who say, my child is picky, won't eat that? What you do?
We definitely hear that. Yep.
Definitely hear the pickiness, and children are. And so some of it is that children are go through a stage of what's called neophobia. So that means that they don't like new things, and it's a developmentally normal stage, and you can understand it. So how do you know whether those mushrooms are going to kill you or not? Well, so you're hesitant. You shouldn't be out eating any old mushroom. So but the way that you figure out whether it's safe or not is that you see somebody else eat it. And if the somebody else eats a food and looks like they like it, then you're more likely to try it. So what we say with the neophobia, which honestly is around, it starts at like early twos, and then gets worse over time. Young babies, when they're having the squash and the green beans, we eat lots of things, but as they get older, then they get more hesitant. So that I have a project called Willingness to Try New Foods. And so it works by imitating what others are doing. We use superheroes in it, eating these various foods, and then the children are more likely to try it. So what we say to families is provide some of the new food, but you eat it. You eat it and look like you're liking it. And don't make a federal case out of it, so that the child feels boxed into a corner. But having it there, you look like you're liking it, and it's available to the child along with some other foods as well. And often that kind of thing works. Right, so lots of it is helping the child be using the nurturance, being positive, and finding a role for the child as well. I don't like playing with food, but I like talking about food. So this pasta is the best friend of the spaghetti. the kind of thing that makes it more normative or within the child's repertoire. Giving the child choices also certainly helps them feel like they're more involved. Would you like this or that? Guess what? At the store, I found this. It's orange. It's really cool. Would you help me try it? Da, 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 da. And it's butternut squash or whatever. So there's an enthusiasm to it without that the child, look how funny this thing looks. But if you cut it in the inside, what color is that? Oh my gosh, that's orange. Right. Yeah. So those, someone asked about a book for parents. There probably is a book for parents that it's making mealtime fun but fun in an interactive way. The child benefits so much from the interactions with the parents. Tremendously, they benefit from that, more than parents, absolutely more than parents realize. And it's not just me saying this, although I will say it. But what happens is what the neuroscientists will show us is that what helps children develop their language and cognitive skills is something called turn taking. So it means that the parent talks, but then the child talks as well. So it's not just the parent, yap, 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 yap. It's the parent and the child, which is how we recommend reading. So if you go to many pediatricians' offices have a program for kids called Reach Out and Read. And the kind of reading that they encourage is where you have a book, and it can be a book about food or a book about anything, but it's the parent uses the book to tell stories with the child. So it's, oh, look at that duck. Where is that duck going? Oh my goodness, what do you think? What do you think that duck is saying there? I don't see the mom duck. Where do you think the mom duck is? Those kinds of, so that you're reading the book, but the child is engaged in looking at it and touching it. That kind of interaction, then what the neuroscientists show us is that basically makes a neural connection and helps the child with their language and cognitive skills. So having that back and forth dialogue at a meal, around food, makes the meal more pleasant. I say to families, if how would you describe the meal? And would you say that it is pleasant? Is it interactive? Are you guys talking about things? Or would you say it's stressful? So we try to figure out how to make a meal less stressful and how to turn the TV off. Many families have the TV on, and then you're not interacting. Basically, you're sitting there. It's kind of mindless eating. And parents will say, oh, that works. Yeah, he's like watching. We had a parent that the kid the child had was underweight, had multiple feeding problems. So when we said we want to videotape you as you do at home, the parent brought in the iPad and said the child won't eat unless the iPad is there. And basically, the iPad was just there, and it was very mindless eating. I mean, who was in control in that situation? Clearly the child. Clearly the child. So it was obviously not working for the child because she wasn't growing well and had this extremely limited diet. So with some challenges, we did get away from the iPad. Right. So you certainly see lots of dysfunctional kinds of things. Someone put in the chat a USDA thing, USDA reference. There are references. CDC has some, USDA has some. I think the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics have some as well. it's sometimes families need help figuring out how to actually operationalize them, how to put them into practice. In other words, they can tell you what you should do. They don't know how to do it. So it's the next step, how to actually put something into place that they need help with. Sometimes it also helps if they understand why they're doing it. Like, why a 2-year-old is having a tantrum. Well, it's the 2-year-old is frustrated and they don't know how to express their frustration. So try to figure out what happens before the tantrum so you can manage the environment and reduce it. And what do you do during the tantrum? And I can talk on and on. So I would say during a tantrum, what you do is you make sure, first, you make sure that number one thing is you make sure the child is safe so that they're not going to throw themselves on something or throw something else. So you make sure they're safe. And you remember that you are smarter than this child. And then what you do is you remove your eyes because the child is not smart enough to recognize that if you're not looking at them, that you still know what's going on. So you remove your eyes. So you're not looking at them, not yelling at them. You're ignoring them, but you are there and making sure they're safe. And when they tone down, which generally they will, you then go in and you're not like, well, no, you're moving on to something else. You relocate them, you move to something else, and you go on. You don't want to reinforce the temper tantrum. All kids will have them at some point, almost all kids, but some get stuck in it, and some parents allow themselves to be manipulated by the temper tantrum. And you try to think what happened before that. So how can we manage the situation to reduce the temper tantrums? So what's your number one headache of of dealing with families, or what do parents ask that you're not sure how to answer? They must give you challenges. What my pediatrician colleagues will say is that that parents will ask them a question basically as they're walking out of the room. They'll say, oh, by the way, my kid was just thrown out of school. Or by the way, the daycare says they can no longer handle my kid. So they will ask, but they bring them up at the end. But because you folks talk about things that they do every day, like meals, like food, I would think that they would be inclined to be asking you these kinds of questions about their behavior. Is my child too heavy? Is my child too thin? I'm worried my child isn't growing enough. My child doesn't talk. If we look at at Maryland, the number one reason that we refer a child for developmental assistance is their language. It's absolutely their language. So that we serve a very large low-income population. Our university's in the middle of a large, very low-income community, and parents don't talk to their children very as much as we might want, and children's language skills are poor. So that's the number one reason that they get referred ours is called Infant and Toddler Program. It's the Individual with Disabilities Education Act that provides early intervention. So it's part of, when you see the CDC's Recognize the Signs Act early. I don't have the acronym exactly right, but it's language. So anything you could do to encourage the talking to your child and listening to your child is beneficial.
Yeah, we use the Learn the Signs Act Early tool with our
yes.
clinics, so they're very familiar with those. Does
Mhm.
anybody else have any other questions before we wrap up for the day? I know it was a lot of information. Is it okay, Dr. Black, if we share your slides with the people at this
Of course.
event today? Great, thank you.
Of course. Mhm.
And anything else? Any other questions, comments, concerns? Thank you, loved it. Great presentation. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Black, for joining us, and thank you everybody for taking time out of your days and away from clinic to be able to join us today. Again, please work with your supervisors on that sign-in sheet so we can get you the credit. And again, Dr. Black, thank you so much. We really, really enjoyed your presentation.
Oh, thank you. You guys you are doing wonderful work. I'm very respectful and thrilled that at what you're doing. So thank you. You're helping many, many kids who will do well in the future. So all the best, and be healthy and be healthy in the future. So good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All the best. Bye-bye.